Hey everyone, welcome back to Cloud IDE Day. My name is Jesse Williams, and I'll be your host for today's panel, which is Moving Tools to the Cloud, Challenges and Best Practices. For those who aren't familiar with me, I'm the host of Cloud Chats here at the Eclipse Foundation. My day job is PMM for Application Integration Services at AWS. And I'm excited to be working with you. I've been part of the Eclipse Foundation for almost 10 years, coming over with EclipseSource. Since then, I worked at several startups, Red Hat, and now I'm at AWS. So I'll quickly introduce our guest for today. Joining us is Mario. Mario, feel free to introduce yourself quickly.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Mario Loriedo. I work for Red Hat, and I'm the project lead for EclipseSource.
Awesome, thank you. I'm also joined by Jonas.
Hi, I'm Jonas Helming, software architect at EclipseSource, and I'm also involved in quite a few tool open source projects. I'm the project lead of Thea and participating in the EMF Cloud and Eclipse GLSP, maybe most relevant for today.
And finally, we're joined by Vincent.
Hi everyone, my name is Vincent Fugnitto, and I work at Ericsson Canada. I'm a software developer at Ericsson over 6 years, and I've been working on the Eclipse Thea framework since 2018.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Vincent, since you're already talking, we'll stick with you.
Yeah.
What interested you in Thea, and where do you see the project moving in the next 5 years?
Well, as some of you may or may not know, Ericsson actually co-created Thea along with Typebox. And it was at the time we were looking for a solution where we could build cloud and desktop IDEs pretty easily. And we weren't happy with the original approach of traditional IDEs, trying to move them to the cloud, because we noticed a lot of issues, and there was a big burden trying to decouple language support out of the IDEs. So it's the reason why we went to create our own framework to support well-known protocols such as the language server protocol and the debug adapter protocol. And more recently, we started supporting the VS Code extension API. And where I see Thea in 5 years, hopefully I still see that the project thrives. There have been a lot of use cases where we've seen a lot of pretty interesting applications based on Thea. And we hope to see that continue to grow in the future. Of course, I would like to see the API gap between us and VS Code to be even smaller, so that we could support the latest and greatest from the marketplace, which now is the OpenVSX one, which is open source. And of course, I would like to see continued efforts in improving the extensibility and the customizability of the framework, and also making it a lot easier to use downstream. That includes documentation and also cleaning up the code and removing any technical debt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Jonas, you're the project lead for Thea. Where do you see the project moving in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So what we can currently observe in our customer projects, and we have built tools for over 10 years now, or I personally built tools for over 10 years now, is that there's a massive shift towards web and cloud-based tools. And that has just started from my point of view. So within 2 years, we basically switched from maybe 20% web-based and cloud-based to now 80% of our projects are web and cloud-based. And along with this, we observe a massive interest in Thea in particular. And for me, it's actually at the moment right at the border where we now consider it to be the next version of the Eclipse Tools platform, because if you build a custom tool in the past, the Eclipse platform has been a very good choice for that. But if you want to move these tools to the cloud, Thea is kind of the perfect choice because it's a very flexible platform to be used as a basis. So within the next 5 years, I would expect that Thea is the next generation of Eclipse, and it will be the basis of a lot of tools that will be migrated to the cloud. And I also expect a lot of innovation and new things will come there. along with more or even more companies joining the ecosystem, which hopefully ends up in a very diverse and good growing ecosystem. And we observe that today already. So new features are brought to Thea that you don't find anywhere else. So I'm really excited about the future of Thea.
Yeah, that's exciting. Along with the VSX registry, it's there's really an expansive ecosystem that's developing around it. Mario, I wanted to ask you. You are part of Che, which uses Thea. From that perspective, where do you hope Thea goes in the next 5 years?
Yeah, we are mainly users of Thea, so we are less involved in the evolution of Thea. But something that I really would like to see Thea in the future is to have some features that are missing, that other IDEs are currently missing, that are required in the cloud. Meaning that, for example, if you are able to share some resources that the IDE is using amongst multiple users. So because the problem we have, so the problem that I've been asked for a long time from Che users is we want to provision 100 IDEs for developers and for 100 developers for an hackathon, for example. And they expect us the amount of memory and the amount of CPU required for that to not to be comparable with what is used on a laptop. But unfortunately today, the technologies that are, so the Thea as a framework doesn't help much on that. So, and that's something that I think it would be wonderful if we could have advancement there.
Yeah. Jonas, do you have any?
Yeah, I actually fully agree with what Mario just said. So we also face this challenge. But I would say it's also an opportunity, because so far, like within the first 5 years of migrating tools to the cloud, what we essentially try to do is kind of move exactly what we had on the desktop to the cloud. Of course, with another technology stack, but we're building tools very similarly to the desktop. So every developer has its own separated workspace and so on. And now we know how to do that. I would 100% agree with Mario. The next challenge would be how to scale that and how to go one step further. For example, a language server. Currently, we have one language server for every user. But if 100 users are working on the same project, there's actually there's a lot of opportunity to not do that, and, for example, share an index, which would be super great for performance and resource optimization. Another related area to that, where I think where I would expect innovation over the next years, are moving some parts of the tool chain and the business logic again back to the clients, potentially. For example, with web workers or WebAssembly. That because I don't foresee that computers will go away very quickly, and we still have a lot of computers that people work on, and we can use this computation power. So I think these two areas have the opportunity for a lot of innovation, because I mean, every project will have this exact challenge. Like if you move everything to the cloud, of course you have some scalability effects there, but you still need the resources, right? So it's very desirable to get down with the resource consumption there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mario, I'm going to come back to you because I'm curious about where you think Che is going in the next 5 years. We've heard a lot of Thea, and before you answer, if anyone who's listening right now has any comments or questions, feel free to drop in the chat. We're happy to address them live as we go. Sorry, Mario, go ahead.
Yeah, so for Che, we're aiming really to be a service that provision IDEs in the cloud. So Thea has been our main IDE, the default IDE for Che, but we want to support others IDE, and not only so developers usually like a lot to work with a command line. So we want also to provide a great experience with some terminal-only in the browser experience, or using other IDEs that are out there. So this is one of the things that we're looking at. Others are better integration with existing services. I mean, the magic of cloud IDEs is that with a click, you actually get everything working and you are ready to code. But with that click, you should also set up your Git configuration, set up your container registry configuration, etc., etc. So we want all those services to have to be set up automatically once the user just click when he wants to start his development environment.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Vincent, I'm going to go over to you now. Looking at cloud IDEs in general, what are some of the features that you're really excited about? This could be with Thea, with Che, with other cloud IDEs. What are you excited about seeing, in comparison to your desktop IDE?
Well, in comparison, I guess with the desktop is probably making use of like the resources that you can get from Workspace managers. Maybe something is even more powerful than your local machine. And yeah, because of the remote work due to the pandemic, I noticed like a bigger push towards pair programming in the cloud, where you can see like live code editing and stuff like that. I think those are pretty interesting new features that we can experiment with. And I'd love to see them in Thea one day.
Yeah. Mario, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, pair programming is something that we've been looking at as well. I think we see the request for that. Another thing that so makes cloud IDEs super powerful is that you can scale in and scale, so you can also scale out. I mean, if you don't need all the resources that you have provision, you can just get a smaller workspace. If you need more, you can get more resources. And that is something that is completely impossible with your laptop. When you run your IDE in your laptop, you cannot just add RAM, add memory, or remove memory. On the cloud, you're actually, so it's really easy to do that. And that's like one of the other magic thing about cloud IDEs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jonas, let's go to you. So people have been talking about pair programming and IDEs for a long time, kind of having that Google Docs style functionality. Are there any challenges that you would see that maybe have stopped us from actually going there? Because that concept has been around for a long time.
Yes, that's actually a very good question. So, I mean, to be fair, enabling live pair programming, you don't need to move your tools to the cloud. You can do that on the desktop, and there are tools available for that since like forever. Of course, it's easier in the cloud, and definitely one advantage is quick onboarding. So especially if you want to drag anybody in, you can just very easily do that by providing a link. So it's an enabler, but nothing was blocking us before to enable that on the desktop. I just basically think there's some conceptual work upcoming that needs to be solved and develop work models how two developers can work on the same piece of source code in parallel and still being efficient, because it's not the same thing as writing a Google Doc together, because a Google Doc doesn't need to compile. So I think that's a very, very interesting area for research and innovation to get the UX right, to really enable two people to efficiently work together. Traditional pair programming models are more oriented, okay, one person has the keyboard, the other person looks or something. But if we can enable a work model where two people can control at the same time and efficiently work together, and I think it's possible, I think it's more a conceptual problem than a technical problem, to be honest. And it's a very, very interesting one and an opportunity. Also, especially because finding skilled people and education are, I think, two of the most important challenges for the next years in software engineering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It would take changes to developer workflows as well as maybe even the Git process, how you're merging code back and forth. So those are great points. Really quickly, we have a question from the audience because we think a lot about front-end IDEs as part of migrating to development in the cloud. What are other important parts of migrating development workflows to the cloud? And what are some pain points and points of opportunity in that transition? Mario, I think you'd be a good person to answer this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we think a lot about. And like the challenge here is that it's easy to start an IDE and to run it in the cloud. The problems start when you want to start, for example, to build something or to run your application. Because when you're on your laptop, you don't really care if you don't know exactly how much memory your build will actually require. It's not something that you focus a lot. On the cloud, every byte counts. So if you use more than the memory that you got, your process will be killed, and it won't work. So that's a huge challenge. CPU memory. So you need to understand exactly how much memory and CPU your development flow will need. So your inner loop activities will require. So like this capacity planning of the resources is like one challenge. The second challenge are like technical challenge. Like there are things that you're able to do on your laptop because you're root, and you won't be able to do on an environment if you're on the cloud, because you don't get to be root for security reason. You may not be able to be root. I'm thinking about multi-tenant clusters of Kubernetes cluster, where usually you cannot run a container as root. And so how do you do a build of a Docker container from a pod in Kubernetes? So these are like the second type of challenge. How do you simulate like being root on your development environment? Because developers are used to be root on their laptop, and they install packages and they do build of Docker images. And so there are new technical ways that allow to do that, but we're not. These are still experimental ways to achieve those things on a cloud environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sticking with some of the challenges of cloud IDEs just in general, this could be adoption. It could be just our ability to engineer certain features. Vincent, what are you seeing as one of the main challenges right now?
I definitely see, because I guess we do want to have a really good user experience, so we don't want to have too much front end to back end communication happening. We want everything that's pretty intensive to be local to the user. In the past, we've noticed that just trying to move things to the cloud, the latency was too high, where you had a bad user experience when you have user interaction. But lately, I've also been seeing a pretty big push towards making sure that if you do have a application in the cloud, that it's well secure. And that's one of the big points for Ericsson.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about some of the best practices with cloud development. So we hit on this a little bit, but let's address it more directly. Mario, I'll go to you. In terms of best practices, Che combines the editor and the environment. Do you believe that when it comes to developer tools, the more of your stack you move to the cloud, the more of that inner loop process that's in the cloud, the better? And is there any place for local tools still?
I think that there is a lot of place for local tools still. My point of view on that is that when you work for a long time on a task, your main project, you probably will want to prefer to have a local tool to do that, because you may switch from offline to online, and you will be able to continue working with it without any problem. And so it's and you get all the power of your machine, and you have some setups that are really you can customize at a finer level on locally. But then when it's about doing a task that you know that it's not your main task, it's something like a pull request review, or trying to reproduce a bug and fixing it right away. So these kind of scenarios, it's much better to do that on your browser instead of having to switch your environment and do a context switching. So it's much better. And about your question on when you're developing your application, is it an opportunity to have your inner loop in the cloud? Definitely. So I mean, a lot of people that use Che use it because they are already on Kubernetes. So they are building an application for Kubernetes, and they don't need to learn anything as soon as they anything about Kubernetes, because they can start the environment and they will start running the application in Kubernetes, and they will see problems like the ones that I mentioned before, memory, that they are actually using more than the memory that they plan to use, or more than the CPU. So those are the typical problems that you get when you run your application in the cloud. Other problems are networking problem, and you run your application on Che environment, well, you will face the networking challenges, because you actually need to access this via your browser through a reverse proxy that will allow you to get to your application. So you don't have just localhost the same interface, and it's where things are easier. You're probably gonna go through maybe a proxy, gateways, etc., to get to your application. So yeah, testing your application directly, so on in Kubernetes, makes it easier to develop, to target Kubernetes.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Looks like we have one question from the audience really quickly. Jonas, I'm going to pass this one to you. The question is, what are your thoughts on blurring the lines between desktop and cloud development environment for IDEs? So they're thinking like most of the time they use their laptop, but and they use a hosted IDE, but then sometimes when they're on an airplane or somewhere where they don't have Wi-Fi, they'll use a local IDE.
I think we're going there. And I think from especially from a front-end technology or IDE technology point of view, it's kind of soft. So for example, it's very simple to build the same tool as a desktop application or as a browser cloud-based application with Thea. I think the main challenge here is the containerization of the development environment and having that available in a cloud-based solution and on the desktop. I think we also have the tools there. One initiative that comes to my mind is the dev files standardization that Che drives for a while, which is kind of a precondition for that you basically, what that means is you have a uniform description of your developer environment that ideally even different tools could process, and basically by running something you can create the same environment locally, for example on Che or on any other cloud hosting tool that is there. That would be the perfect world, and then the backend or the environment problem would also be solved. So I think we're getting there, and it's very desirable. The question is, do we get there fully before we actually have internet available everywhere? Because in our days, on many projects, even if you have the environment fully available, it's, at least personally, I make this experience, it's kind of hard to develop without internet, because then you have one dependency that you want to add, then it's not there. You want to look something up, you cannot access internet. So it's possible, but if you want to do it, at least personally, I have to prepare something that I know, okay, I can work on for 4 hours without having internet connection. It's unusual. Yeah. So answering quick, I think we're getting there. Main challenge is the containerization from my point of view, of the development environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for the questions, chat. Okay, so Vincent, let's go to you. I have two questions. So one, in your organization, are you predominantly using cloud developer tools across your teams? And then if you are, or if you aren't, how does adoption go, when you're trying to drive adoption of these tools across an organization?
Right. I don't think I could speak on behalf of like all of Ericsson because it's quite big, but at least in our
Sure.
team, we've been mainly working desktop IDs. I think that's where we're most comfortable with. But like Mario said, there is a hybrid model where we have maybe longer PRs that are done locally, and then sometimes we do the reviews, let's say in something like J or Gitpod, where it's pretty simple and quickly set up. But if I were to say what's like holding us back from going completely cloud, I think mostly it's just the point of view from the company to stay, I guess, for security reasons. And also, well, we're working on it, but we don't have a solution, I guess, yet internally for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jonas, what are your thoughts on that? Do your teams, are your teams using mostly cloud IDEs?
I would claim it's probably 50-50 at the moment. It depends on the project, because we also align with our customers to ideally use the same environment there. One barrier that I observe is if you want to go cloud-based, which I think is desirable, but you immediately have to solve all the issues that developer have every day on their machine, their setups, whatever, in a central way, which is, I think, more efficient to do that, but it's kind of a big mountain you have to climb initially. And for example, just one very trivial sounding problem is if you have 1,000 developers in the local machines, they consume power, they consume resources. It's paid for from a project point of view because they have the power supply, they have the laptops. Now, if you want to move these 1,000 developers to the cloud, suddenly there are new costs. And somebody has to decide who pays for these new costs. Of course, midterm, if they consume less power and have smaller laptops, there is potential to save costs, obviously. I mean, that's one of the big goals. But short term, like, who pays for the new costs, right? And that's just one example of things that you suddenly have to solve in a central way, where there's no standard answers in many organizations. So it's a process, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is interesting. It's a major shift organizationally. Looks like we have a follow-up question on one of the things that Mario said. So the question is that it's more of an observation than a question, but Mario brought up VMs are more constrained than desktops. Is that true? And they say that they think that it's a question of billing and overly constraining, and they can make a desktop with 512 megabytes of RAM and it will crash as reliably as a VM. I would agree with that, but Mario, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so no, I was talking more about the world of containers. So that's the difference between VMs and containers, is that in a VM you usually are you're root, you're able to install packages, but that's not the way that not what we have decided to follow with Che. So we really want to create to start ephemeral container-based development environments because they are repeatable. So if you give a VM to your team, so every user will have a VM, they will have their package installed, and they will have differences between the VMs, and that will become kind of a so not a nightmare, but it's like on the desktop. So everyone has. So you will start having, okay, it works on my machine, I don't know why it doesn't work on your machine. Whereas if you use a container, you have a completely repeatable environment, but you lose in terms of being able to run as root in your environment. So yeah, that's the difference.
Got it. So we had a question that just came in. Jonas, I'll send this one to you. It's about security, and they're wondering if they're seeing companies running an on-prem installation of a cloud IDE.
Yes, so we observed that, and it depends really on the domain and the infrastructure whether this makes sense or not. If you are in a domain where security already plays a role, and you have the knowledge and infrastructure to host something more isolated and more secure than, for example, a cloud provider, then I think it makes sense. Of course, if you don't have that, you don't necessarily gain security by hosting something yourself. Like, I mean, there are examples where even big companies moved their on-premise hosting to cloud providers because they basically came to the conclusion that they don't have the resources to secure their on-premise installation. But so yes, I would say 50-50. What's a dangerous path though, if you go for on-premise installation and you only provide internal access and you don't have a good solution again to access this internal network, you might lose some of the advantages, meaning, for example, access from everywhere.
Got it. Yeah. There's a follow-up question. We can stick with you, Jonas, but they're asking what are the specific security reasons that people worry about most with cloud IDEs? And then I think more importantly on this question is, are they still valid?
Yeah. So, I mean, two things come to my mind. One is, a cloud developer workspace contains often everything, right? The source code, secret libraries, credentials, whatnot, access to databases. So if this gets stolen, that's really a major issue. So it's really a key asset that you must protect. And is it still valid? Yes. I mean, you if you move it to the cloud, you can attack local computers too, but it's many times easier in the cloud. Second thing that must not forgotten is, it depends on what kind of tool you provide. But if you provide a tool to public users, like a lot of users, one security issue is also misuse of resources, right? So if you have a G instance where you have unknown users, you wait 5 days and people install Bitcoin miners into the developer workspace and just use them. I mean, why not? Yeah. So that's another potential security threat there that comes to my mind. And is it valid? Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we have another question. Vincent, I'll pass this one over to you. For embedded development IDEs, users mostly have boards connected with their laptop that they would like to use. Does Thea as a framework have any limitation in using local devices?
So as far as I know, there's no limitation. And actually, ARM, which is another contributor, part of the framework, their main IDE supports this use case. And I believe they also support it in the cloud, where you can have the local board plugged in by USB and everything. So I don't see any limitation. I think there's actually a real use case and product already that supports it.
Yeah, maybe I would like to add to that. So I fully agree with Vince. We just finished a small research POC, where we actually did a prototype of what we call the cloud deployment server. And the idea is there, instead of having all the boards locally at your PC, we connect them to an arbitrary machine in the cloud somewhere in a data center. And then we provide you with a UI where you can actually select from 1,000 different boards you want to deploy to, and then you send the code over the wire, over a cloud distribution service to this board. You can debug on this board, you can observe the board. So it doesn't make sense for all applications, because sometimes you really need the board if it's connected to hardware or so. But just to test, for example, whether the code runs on the board and the resources are fine and you want to debug something on the board, this could even be done over the wire. And it works even from a cloud service that is running on Kubernetes. You just need a connection somewhere a physical connection. But I think this is an interesting area of innovation, even to even move the hardware to the cloud, kind of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was a great question. Thanks, chat, for dropping that one in. Mario, let's go to you. I think an interesting thing that we've been talking about is the adoption of cloud IDEs. What would you recommend to a team or an individual who wants to adopt regarding, architecture, development strategy, when they're starting to use a new tool?
What I would like, first of all, I think that if you want to adopt Cloud IDE in your team, so for your team, I think you should not force all the developers of your team to use that. There are multiple use cases for Cloud IDEs that are really where the Cloud IDE will win, and you should really focus on that path. And then the other thing is the other thing we were talking about is that if you're targeting, your architectural target for your application is an application that runs in the cloud, you'd better moving your developers closer to that target platform. So meaning that developing there and testing there will actually make it there, so they will see the benefit, even if they will maybe stop using their beloved local desktop IDE. They will see the benefit right away.
Yeah, that makes sense. Vincent, do you want to comment on this one?
No, I don't have much else to add.
Yeah. Jonas, how about you?
I just want to repeat, make them see the benefit. Like, ask them, if they don't want to use them, ask them why, and really go user-centric approach, which has not been done so much in the past for developers, but developers are also just users of a software, which is a tool. So look at them, look at their issues, and just as Mario said, like provide benefits and then make them see the benefits, and they will use it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things I would love to talk to you guys about, let's just transition off of best practices for Cloud IDEs. Let's talk about building community around Cloud IDEs. So what are the best practices, Mario, we'll go to you, or actually, let's go to Vincent. Let's go to Jonas, because Jonas, you mentioned this early on. You were talking about how many committers you're seeing start to bring different features to Thea. What have you done to make the project one, easy for an individual to commit to, but then also easy for an organization to want to contribute to?
Oh, that's a good question. So first of all, when I will say we, because that's really the work of a lot of people, some of which are not even working for the project anymore, because it has quite some history. For Thea in particular, I would say the technology stack is very well architectured. It's comparably small code base doing a lot of stuff. It sets on standards wherever it can, so it doesn't reinvent the wheel. Whenever possible, it really uses a standard technology piece, which makes it easier for people to onboard. These are maybe the technical dimensions. And from a community point of view, I think it's important to be very open for new people, very inviting. Like, for example, we have a weekly developer call where you can just join. We try to always answer new script or questions on the discussions. For example, Vince is one of the, if not even the most frequent a person that answers questions there. Try to react to issues, and if there's a PR, try to provide good reviews and help to get people onboarded, essentially. That's the second dimension, like just provide good community work, provide good documentation. And third, obviously, is try to be attractive for adopters, right? I mean, people contribute for a reason, and it's typically they adopt the technology and want to make it even better, but they want to make it better because they adopt it. So I think it's very important to listen to adopters, try to get in contact with them, which is not even simple because often you don't know them, and try to understand how you can make the project better for them. So, and this is an ongoing challenge. I don't think that we have solved that. These are our goals to get better every day at that.
Yeah. Vincent, I'd love to hear you chime in on that one as well.
Yeah, exactly what Jonas said. We try to be as welcoming as we can to new contributors. Trying to be as responsive as we can to new pull requests and discussions. But I think we also try to build a pretty good community when we have, we have our own conferences that we plan. This year we also had our own hackathon that Jonas was a part of. Just trying to really onboard people into the project and try to get them excited about contributing for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Mario, what are your thoughts as far as the Che community goes?
Yeah, so I think that I will. I cannot say much more on the side of the community. So I would welcome. I would make feel people that want to contribute welcome to the project. And so I think that Vincent and Jonas have said everything. What I would like to add is what we try to do is that we try to understand what's behind the. So we get a lot of people trying to address problems in Che today. So every week, every day, we get questions and we need to answer. So what's happening behind that? What's the use case? And beyond the use case, what's the company behind that? And what's actually, how can we align the vision and the goals that we have as a company? I mean, my company, Red Hat, with the goals of another company like AWS or somebody else that want to work on the same thing. So I think it's important to understand that, because a lot of times, so if we don't understand the use case, we may go into implementing something that actually the company will lose interest and so they will stop contributing. So we need to understand the use case and the value of Che for the other company.
Awesome. So we have another question that just came in from the chat. It's a follow-up for Jonas. They're asking about the POC for sending SW2 boards available to the public. Okay, yeah. So
Not yet, but will be soon.
Okay,
so if you follow my blog, for example, or on Twitter, you will be notified about that.
Cool. Do you want to shout out your Twitter handle really quickly so they know where to go for that?
Jonas Helming. My name just capitalized.
All right, perfect. All right, and then Mario, last question here. What was the biggest challenge for IDE developers when transitioning to the cloud, and what different paradigms do they need to change?
Well, yeah, so I've spent a lot of time. My first days as a contributor to Che were actually to transition Che that was running with locally on containers or VMs, but local, using Docker Compose, to Kubernetes. And so the application started to be slow because we actually needed. So the first thing that you need to do is that you need to start monitoring the resources that you're using. In Che, so for TIA, we have a built-in plugin that tells you the resources in terms of memory and CPU that are used by your IDE and your application while you're coding. And this is super important and makes you figure out, because sometimes things may be slow and you don't know exactly if that's because you are fetching the data from somewhere and it's taking time, or is it because the CPU has been throttled by the orchestrator, so by Kubernetes. So this is something like keeping an eye on resources. And the other important thing is, again, I said it before as well, but you need to keep in mind that when you run something on the cloud, it will run behind a proxy. So you need to design your application so that it runs well behind that proxy, that reverse proxy.
Awesome. Does anyone have anything to add to that? All right. Well, that was our last question for the panel today. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Vincent, thank you for joining. Jonas, Mario, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being a great host.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.